Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? Or reached for someone's name, someone you've known for years, and felt it just vanish? Now be honest with yourself. Is this happening more often than you'd like to admit? If the answer is yes, what I'm about to show you might be one of the most important pieces of information you'll receive in the coming years. I'm not talking about miracle supplements. I'm not talking about empty promises. I'm talking about three compounds that neuroscience has been studying for decades. Compounds that longevity-focused physicians already include in their own personal protocols. Most people believe that memory loss is inevitable. They assume forgetfulness is just part of getting older, and that there's not much to do besides accept it. This is one of the biggest misconceptions in brain health. The human brain has a capacity called neuroplasticity, the ability to form new connections, regenerate structures, and even compensate for damage. And this capacity doesn't disappear at 60, 70, or 80 years old. What actually happens is that the internal environment of your brain gets progressively compromised over time by chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and most importantly, by the deficiency of specific nutrients that neural tissue needs to function. When these three factors combine, the result is exactly what you feel in everyday life. Difficulty concentrating, names that disappear from your mind, stories you've already told but can't remember telling. The good news is that targeted nutrition can reverse much of this. And that's exactly what we're going to break down right now. Drop a comment and tell me, what country or city are you watching from? I'd love to know where our community is coming from. Vitamin D3 is not an ordinary vitamin. From a biochemical standpoint, it acts as a steroid hormone, and its receptors are spread across virtually every cell in your body, including neurons. Studies published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease show that people with low vitamin D3 levels have a significantly higher risk of developing accelerated cognitive decline and dementia. But what very few people know is the specific mechanism behind this. Vitamin D3 regulates the expression of genes involved in clearing amyloid plaques in the brain. These plaques are the same ones associated with Alzheimer's disease, and your brain has a nightly cleaning system called the glymphatic system, which works best when D3 levels are adequate. On top of that, D3 modulates the production of neurotrophins, including the well-known BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially the fertilizer for your neurons. Without enough BDNF, neural connections weaken and long-term memory becomes impaired. The bigger problem is that the vast majority of people, even those living in sunny regions, are deficient in vitamin D3. This happens because skin synthesis of the vitamin requires sun exposure at specific times of day, without sunscreen, and for a sufficient duration. Most people work indoors, apply sunscreen daily, and go years without ever checking their blood levels. The optimal range for cognitive health is not what the lab marks as normal. Longevity physicians work with levels between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter, while conventional medicine considers anything above 20 nanograms per milliliter acceptable. There is an enormous difference between not being deficient and having the optimal level for your brain to function properly. D3 supplementation should always be done under medical supervision, since it's a fat-soluble vitamin and can accumulate. But when properly dosed, ideally alongside vitamin K2, which prevents calcium from depositing in the wrong places, it becomes one of the most powerful long-term brain protection interventions available in modern medicine. Vitamin B12 is probably the most well-known of the three we're covering today. But well-known doesn't mean well understood. There is a significant gap between what conventional medicine considers an adequate B12 level and what precision neuroscience defines as a functional level for the brain, and it's in that gap that millions of people live. People who get their labs done, receive a within normal range result, and continue experiencing brain fog, cognitive fatigue, and difficulty retaining new information. B12 is essential for the formation of myelin, the sheath that wraps around nerves like a fiber optic cable. When myelin is intact, electrical signals travel through neurons with speed and precision. When it degrades due to B12 deficiency, those signals become slow and imprecise, and you experience this as foggy thinking, slow information processing, and short-term memory failures. What's even more alarming is that myelin degeneration can be silent for years before manifesting in obvious ways. Another critical mechanism is B12's role in homocysteine metabolism. Homocysteine is an amino acid that, in excess, is directly toxic to blood vessels and neurons. Elevated homocysteine levels are associated with accelerated brain atrophy, especially in the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for forming new memories. B12, together with folate and B6, is one of the main cofactors that converts homocysteine into methionine, rendering it harmless. When B12 is low, even within normal range, this conversion fails, homocysteine rises, and the brain pays the price. Risk groups for B12 deficiency are far broader than most people think. Vegetarians and vegans are the most commonly cited, but people over 50 have reduced intestinal absorption regardless of diet. Those taking metformin for diabetes or proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux also have significantly compromised absorption. And perhaps most alarming, B12 deficiency symptoms are frequently mistaken for anxiety, depression, or simply stress, and people spend years being treated for the wrong thing while their neurons continue to suffer. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Your comment also helps the algorithm bring this content to more people who need it. Here is the promise I made at the beginning. The third substance is the least discussed and possibly the most important one specifically for memory itself. I'm talking about choline. It's not a vitamin in the classical sense, but it is an essential nutrient that the body produces in insufficient amounts for the brain's demands and must be obtained through diet or supplementation. Choline is the direct precursor to acetylcholine, the primary neurotransmitter involved in memory, learning, attention, and motor control. When researchers want to create an animal model of dementia in the lab, one of the most commonly used methods is blocking acetylcholine receptors. That alone is enough to produce all the classic symptoms of memory loss. And when you have a choline deficiency, the same process unfolds gradually and silently in your brain over the years. But choline goes beyond acetylcholine. It is fundamental to the integrity of the membranes of every brain cell. Neurons are surrounded by a phospholipid membrane, and phosphatidylcholine is one of its main components. When choline is lacking, neuronal membranes lose flexibility and function, and the neuron's ability to receive and transmit signals diminishes. It's as if the walls of your cells are slowly cracking from a lack of building material. There is also a deep connection between choline and the glymphatic system we mentioned when discussing vitamin D3. Recent studies show that choline directly influences the quality of deep sleep, which is exactly the phase when the glymphatic system works to clear metabolic waste from the brain. People with low choline intake report less restorative sleep, which creates a vicious cycle. Less choline, worse sleep, less brain cleaning, more toxin accumulation, more compromised memory. The main dietary sources of choline are eggs, beef liver, chicken, salmon, and some vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. Eggs deserve special attention. The yolk of a single egg contains approximately 150 milligrams of choline, and the recommended daily intake for adults is around 400 to 550 milligrams. Ironically, for decades, eggs were demonized because of cholesterol, and an entire generation reduced their consumption of precisely the most accessible and bioavailable choline-rich food in existence. The consequences of that, in terms of collective brain health, are still being studied. For those seeking supplementation, the most researched and efficient forms are alpha-GPC or CDP choline, also known as citicoline. Citicoline has a robust research profile in neurological rehabilitation contexts and is showing promising results in populations with mild cognitive decline. Here's something almost no content on this subject addresses. D3, B12, and choline don't act in isolation. They form a synergistic trio that protects the brain in complementary layers. D3 creates the hormonal environment favorable to neuroplasticity and clears the plaques. B12 maintains the conduction structure of neurons and controls homocysteine. Choline provides the fuel for the memory neurotransmitter and preserves cellular membrane integrity. When any one of the three is lacking, the other two cannot fully compensate. It's like a three-link chain. The weakest link determines the strength of the whole. This explains why so many people take B12 and don't feel a significant difference, or test their vitamin D and notice no cognitive improvement. The missing piece may be the third element that was never considered. At the beginning of this video, I promised you would leave with concrete, actionable information. So let's get straight to the point. The first step is to test your levels. Ask your doctor for an assessment that includes 25-OH vitamin D3, vitamin B12, and homocysteine. Homocysteine is the most sensitive indirect indicator that B12 and folate are working well together. These three tests are relatively affordable and give a very clear picture of where you stand. The second step is to review your diet without obsession, but with intention. Include whole eggs regularly unless there is a specific medical contraindication. If you are vegetarian or vegan, B12 supplementation is not optional. It is necessary. And consider conscious sun exposure, at least 20 minutes a day at the right time, as part of your cognitive health routine. The third step is to understand that no supplement replaces lifestyle. Quality sleep, regular physical activity, and stress management are the pillars on which any nutritional protocol rests. The nutrients we discussed here amplify those pillars, but they don't replace them. And the fourth step, perhaps the most important of all, stop normalizing forgetfulness. Don't accept that your brain will inevitably get worse with time. Modern neuroscience shows that the right interventions, made at the right time, can not only slow cognitive decline, but in many cases partially reverse it. People who reach 90 and 100 years old with a sharp memory aren't just genetically lucky. The vast majority of them share patterns of behavior, nutrition, and lifestyle that science can identify, study, and increasingly replicate. One final call to action: write in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Beyond helping me get to know our community, that simple act of engaging is already an exercise in presence and intention. And if you know someone who complains about poor memory, share this video with them. This information might reach them at exactly the right moment.